welcome to Cosplaystitchandseam. I'm Pannon.
I'm B-Fire.
And I'm David.
Hooray!
Yay!
I feel like my default is just hooray!
Hooray!
I'm just glad we're all here.
Yeah.
Made it another week.
Another week, another lovely episode. As always, if you lovely listeners at home would like to give us a suggestion for a topic idea, if you want us to cover anything specific, if you just want to reach out and say hi, you can send us those at cosplaystitchandseam@gmail.com or
At cosplaystitchandseam.com, you can fill out our googly Google form, or
Go to the Facebook page. Join our Work in Progress Wednesday while you're there after you send us your messages there. And if you're not a big Facebook person, we understand. Discord is also an option. We've got a great Discord community, and it grows every single day. We just even had like 3 people show up in the middle of the night one day, and it was really great. And I was also really tired, so I couldn't welcome them personally like I like to. But that was still a lot of fun, just seeing like, oh, look at that, new people right off the bat. So join our Work in Progress Wednesdays there or on our Facebook page. We make sure that we drop the link every now and again on both our Facebook and our Twitter. And if you're on the internet, if you want to help out the show, there's a lot of ways that you can do that. Give us a shout out. We don't pay to advertise in any way, shape, or form. So word of mouth is the best way that we get around. Leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, on Pod Chaser, on Audible, wherever they let you. We'll give you a shout out on the show. We also have a Patreon, patreon.com/cosplaystitch, where at $3 a month, we give you a shout out on the show, and $5 a month, you get to join our fantastic D&D live stream.
Stream.
It's a cosplay-themed D&D session where I am the DM, Pannon and Mercedes, and Dustin and Jazzy play as well. And it's a lot of fun, and we play that once a month, the first Sunday of every month usually, so we will be playing next time on the 6th of June.
Yeah, plenty of time to join up, get caught up on the previous episode, and be ready because things are about to get crazy.
Oh, yeah.
I'm so excited. Also on our Discord, we have a little hangout coming up. We like to do those every so often. This time it's going to be May 29th at 7 p.m. We're going to be watching Dungeons and Dragons, the movie, with Jeremy Irons, I believe.
That is correct.
Yes.
Yeah.
And our whole Cosplay Chronicles crew is going to be there, and you guys can hang out and watch the movie with us too. It'll be a lot of fun. Mercedes, we got a new project going on. Why don't you tell us about it?
oh yeah, we have a new project. Since last week we talked about the fan art and fan fiction and all that kind of stuff, we decided we wanted to share your fan fiction.
Yeah.
So
I'm so into this.
I'm into this. I haven't done like anything like this in ages. Dude, we should write some.
I will totally write some.
But yeah, so you can email us at cosplaystitchandseam@gmail.com. Please keep it PG-13.
And probably
We
under
are-
5,000 words?
Yeah, keep it like short story stuff. Send us your fan fiction, any pronunciation that you need in it, and if you have a preference for who you would like to read your story, please let us know. We will make sure that you get the right voice, the right tone for it if you want. The deadline to get your fan fiction into us is going to be July 1st, just in time for all of our birthdays, and so we'll have like a birthday fan fiction stream.
Birthday fan fiction extravaganza. This is going to be the best present. I am so excited. And remember, your fanfics can be about anything. It doesn't have to be like a specific fandom. It doesn't have to be about our podcast. You can do a self-insert even. Just whatever you want to write about. We want to hear your contributions to fandom and what you're excited about.
Although bonus points if it is about us. Like, no, not gonna lie. It's gonna... I need the ego to be, like, padded a little bit.
Amazing. As always, foxbeautycosmetics.com. That's FOXX beautycosmetics.com. Use the promo code Stitchandseam, and you'll get 10% off your purchase of their all-vegan, not tested on animal products that are great for cosplay. Our featured material, we're doing another one of those in the series this week. Mercedes, do you want to tell us about it?
Yeah, the fan art stuff also got me going. I'm like, I like paint. So we're going to be talking about different paints and things for cosplay today.
This is, like, I loved this one, but it's also such a broad topic because, like, how we, I don't know, it just it seems like every project almost has paint somewhere in it.
It's very rare that you can get away without using any paint.
Right.
I'm trying to think of any of mine that I've done that, and the answer is just no.
So a brief history of paint. It is actually listed as one of the earliest inventions of humanity, according to Wikipedia. Because some cave paintings have been drawn with like red and yellow ochre, hematite, manganese oxide, and charcoal. They could have been used by early Homo sapiens as early as 40,000 years ago. So we have long been into painting. And I think like there was a recent discovery that we're even older than that. So
nice.
I know.
I love seeing that kind of stuff. My art history class went over a bunch of like cave paintings in France.
Oh yeah.
And it's so cool.
That's awesome. They also used to mix them with like animal fat, milk, or eggs to give it well, we're kind of going to talk about this in the episode, but there's paint and there's pigment. And what pigment is like the powdery stuff that you mix into your paint base that gives you the color. So even way back then, they were mixing stuff with their pigments to get paint.
Huh. Okay.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
Right?
There's so many different things to like get a paint to paint.
Yeah. Some of the pigments used, let's see, on the colored walls in Dendera, Egypt, have been exposed to elements for years and are still just as vivid as when they were painted. They would mix their colors with a gummy substance and then applied them separately so they didn't blend. That's why with the ancient Egyptian artworks, you see like a lot of just solid colors with dark outlines.
I love that aesthetic, though.
I know, it's so pretty. It's so pretty. A lot of paints will either use oil or water as a base, and still, obviously, something that we use a ton of today. And though we have a lot fewer lead-based paints, thankfully, because that was one of the pigments that they used to mix in, and obviously did not keep doing that for a while.
I heard it was really tasty though. Like you could just eat it right off the can.
I have not heard that.
What?
Yum.
No, I'm totally BSing. Like
okay, I was like, that doesn't seem safe.
The red is cherry flavored.
That's the joke.
Okay.
Please don't eat paint.
Please do not eat paint in any form.
Does not endorse the eating of paint or lead-based products.
Please don't. Oh my gosh, my brain is like not ready for this. I was like, what?
Oh,
remember those markers that used to smell like different smelly things?
Do. I love those.
That's such a bad way to teach kids to sniff markers.
I don't know what you're talking about. I is fine.
He was very fine.
Anyways.
So pigments are, like I said, what colored the paint. It's usually like a granular solid. They're classified as either natural or synthetic. So natural pigments are going to have like various clays and calcium and talc, and synthetics are apparently, like I just learned this today, is like engineered molecules, calcined clays, synthetic pyrogenic silicas. Yeah.
So I was looking at like your list of those, and I remembered in like this is such a weird tangent. Horizon Zero Dawn.
Yeah.
You can collect pigments in the DLC for a Banuk painter because she's painting the walls with like all these colors and stuff. But I was like, I get like getting pigments from like flowers and stuff. For some reason, that's never like been questioned in my brain. But then I'm like going to like these heat vents and whatnot in Yellowstone and like picking up stuff, and I'm like, what is this? What is that? Like, what is the actual material? And now I know.
Yeah. It's
and
cool.
It's like, okay, that was more legit than I thought. That's pretty dope.
Amazing. So, yeah, we want to talk about pigment a little. We want to talk about, we're not going to go into, obviously, every type of paint because not all paints are going to be applicable to cosplay. I mean, maybe
you
they
could
are.
Find a way.
You could find a way, yeah.
That's what cosplay is all about, is finding a way.
Right. But some of the ones we wanted to talk about are like watercolors, just because I've used those here and there, like mostly for like dyeing or watering things down, or like oh gosh, when I did Fruits Basket cosplay forever ago, I was Toru, but I did a Juni Hitoe, which is like a 12-layered kimono. So I did one for each of the zodiac animals. And
that's so cool. Oh,
it was
I remember
so fun.
that. Yeah.
But I also had, because Toru always carries around a picture of her mother. So I actually did a drawing of her, but I did it in the old like ukiyo-e style. And it was so fun, but I used watercolors for that because it took really well into the fabric I was using. So yeah, you can also use oil paint. Probably not like actual oil paints on your skin, but we do use a lot of grease paints in our body paints these days. Don't use oil paint on your skin, but oil paint is actually good for specifically like latex products. So if you need to tint your ears, if you're doing like elves and things like that, it's really good for that.
Ooh, okay. Now I need to try a thing.
We got I think acrylic, I feel like, is one of like the most all-purpose, well-used, all-around paints that almost anything you can just use acrylic. Yeah.
Dude, I have a wall of acrylic paints in here, and also I walked to my door the other day of my project room, and there was another box of acrylic paints sitting outside of it, and I was like, what is this? And Chris is like, you agreed to have these. And they were from a mutual friend of ours, and I was like, oh yeah, I did say that I'd take those, and so I have another box of them too now.
Oh man. So you
can't have enough.
I love acrylic because it's got such a wide variety of colors. It's bright. It's easy to use. The biggest downside, though, is those freaking acrylic paint boogers. Do you know what I'm talking about? I hate those so much.
Acrylic paint boogers?
Yes! Have you ever, like, you shake up the can and instead of, like, the paint coming out all nice, it just goes like...
Yeah.
It's so gross. Oh.
Or, like, I hate it when I'm, like, I make, like, a nice mixture for dyeing leather. I'll take like a big old like paintbrush full and just like start putting it on the leather, and then I get those little boogers all through it. It's like, you're ruining the texture.
I hate paint boogers. They're the worst.
I'm gonna call them paint boogers from now on. I love it.
Oh,
I'm gonna gag next time too.
No, sorry.
Boogers are gross. Okay.
So in the vein of acrylics, there's also like you can get some enamel based. You can also get that in like model paints. Enamel based are good for like those minifigs and things like that. It gives it kind of like it has a different finish to it. It sets differently.
They're really nice for getting a good metallic sheen.
Yeah.
Golds and silvers. Yes.
Really nice in an enamel. Yeah. And then we also have primers, which are kind of like we'll go over it a little bit more when we talk about props, but primers are what you use to basically set your canvas, get whatever you're going to paint ready to be painted. Because it's made to like smooth out your base basically, and also to it's made to like pull pigments into it. So like when you do your color layer on top of it, it wants to stick to it. It wants to draw it onto your project.
Yeah, and the kind of primer color that you choose is also important.
Oh, definitely.
But again, we can go over that later.
Yeah. And then since we're talking about pigments, we got to talk about dyes, which are like paints, just a lot more diluted and a lot of fun. And also, I have like a love-hate with dyes because they're so much fun. And they're really cool, like, in a finished product. But I hate how unpredictable they can be. So I find them a little bit, like, I have an issue with control and letting go of control and giving it to the dye sometimes. I'm just like, you better not ruin this thing that I worked so hard on. So
okay, but, like, other than putting in highlights in a wig, I do not dye wigs anymore. Every single time. Even if I do a test run, it turns out wrong. I just have no luck with it. Never doing it again. Nope.
That's so funny because when I was doing the Harley Quinn wig, the pink side took super easy, right?
Oh yeah.
Stuck it in like maybe 5 minutes in and out kind of thing, dipping it so that way it would have kind of like a fade effect going from the top to a very bold color at the bottom. Pink side worked perfectly great. I was, again, probably there 5-10 minutes at most. And then the blue side took me 45 minutes.
Oh boy.
Same brand, same temperature. I kept everything exactly the same.
Oh man.
Just took way longer for the blue to stick other than the pink. I have no idea why.
Those temperamental dyes. Yeah, like that's exactly what I mean by like it's so hard to predict.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we're going to talk about all these different paints and pigments. And before we start, I did want to mention that a lot of paints are toxic. And if you're going to use them, you should probably have the proper protective gear, ventilators, doing it in an open area. Make sure you are doing it safely. Yeah.
Yeah, don't spray paint inside.
Please, no. Oh, I had a job where I had to do that, and it was the worst.
Dude, I have a new adjustable workbench, so you can change the height on it, you can change the angle and everything. It's super awesome because you can stick like an old piece of wood on it and paint. You put it up to the height that you need. Now I don't have to go outside and like crouch down in my little like paint tent that I have.
Oh, that's nice. I
can now like set this up, set my paint thingy all around it so I'm not spraying paint all over the yard. Mm-hmm. And it's so nice. And I love KSL.
Oh man.
We got it for so cheap. It's like a really expensive work table and he got it for like $75.
Oh wow. Yeah. Oh, speaking of spray paint, before we get started, I did not realize until I worked at that job that you can actually like spray paint into like a paper cup and just spray it for a little bit and then use it with a brush. It's like it was a game changer for me because spray paints are always like, a big broad spray, but I'm like, no, you can actually use it for small details that way. It's cool.
It's a really fun way to weather stuff with that.
And then that way, like, you can maintain, like, the same color effect and whatnot for the rest of the body. Yeah.
Yeah,
I've seen that before a couple of times from, like, other cosplayers. And it's just awesome. Like, that's genius. I would have never thought of that.
Right.
Yeah, love it. When Garnet Runestar was getting ready for WCS, I got to see her weather her costume. And just, like, that's what she did was the spray paint method. And I was just like, this is super cool.
Nice, yeah.
And, like, it goes into the fabric, too. Like, you can put it on the fabric, and it's not going to, like, depending on the kind of fabric, it may ruin it. You got to be careful about that. But with what she was using, test what she was using, it looked so good.
Oh, good.
She smelled like spray paint. But I figure that'll go down over time.
Yeah, for sure. So that's a good segue, actually, to using different paints in sewing.
Yes.
And fabrics and whatnot. I know there's like a knee-jerk reaction when you're like, you can use spray paint on clothing, but no, you really can. You may want to use a specific technique, like the one you mentioned, Mercedes. Or make sure. Yeah, spray in a cup. Use like very, very light layers. Make sure you do testing, and just be aware that it is going to change the feel of the fabric. And if you're not okay with that, maybe choose a different kind of paint.
Like, she was doing Bloodborne, so, like, it made total sense that the fabric would feel that roughness to it. Because it's like, she's getting splattered with blood, it's Bloodborne, it's gory, it's like... Yeah, but she was able to keep that same, like, consistent color through everything, like David was saying.
Nice.
Also, because of all the gold work on it, she was able to shade those, too, and it stays.
Nice.
So,
like that. I'm going to have to try that.
It added some really pretty depth to it. Like, I was just sitting there being like, I am in awe.
See, and that was my biggest problem with Into the Spider-Verse. Because in the end, spoilers for Into the Spider-Verse, which is like 6 years old at this point, he spray paints almost the entire spider suit. And I was like, no, that thing's going to be cracking. It's going to look bad. And like every cosplayer in the world is rolling their eyes. I guarantee it. But he makes it look good.
Yeah.
Cartoons and whatnot.
It is a possible thing to do. And maybe it wasn't just spray paint he was using. Maybe it was a fabric dye spray, which you can get. I have one I'm going to eventually turn my office chair black with it.
Oh, nice.
Listen, I don't need you to throw logic at me like this.
Oh, okay.
Oh, man. Well, like for when I did the Sylveon Gijinka, it had all these little Sakura blossoms, and all the Sakura blossoms are like dark pink in the middle and light pink on the edges. And I looked everywhere for a fabric spray paint for that to get a nice ombre, and I could not find it anywhere. And so I just went and bought like regular spray paint and just did like really light layers. It has the effect I want. It looks really nice, but I wouldn't want to touch it on those little blossoms, but they're just blossoms. So it worked for what I needed it to do. So yeah, just be aware of how the paint changes your fabric. I like using it. I love doing complicated applique. Like, it's super fun.
Oh my gosh, it looks so pretty.
It looks really pretty. Like when I did 5 from Tsubasa, like back of that coat took me forever because I was like, no, it has to be applique. But like I've seen it done in paint and it looks amazing. So like I wouldn't be one to tell someone that one is better than the other. I think paint is really good for complicated designs so it doesn't like weigh down your fabric. And you can get really clean designs still with stencils that you like. Applique is nice, but you can also get the same effect with paint, I guess is what I'm saying. Yeah, I don't know. Like I have done it both ways, and I am hesitant to say that any one way is better than another because I think you can make it look amazing both ways. Just be aware of what the paint you're using is going to do to the fabric, how it's going to change it.
Kind of think about what kind of effect do you want to have, and is this giving you that effect that you're aiming for?
Yeah. I honestly use acrylic paints a lot on fabric just because they stick to it stupidly well. Just try to avoid using it too thickly because that can make it prone to cracking. Usually when I use acrylic paints, I have like kind of a watery brush and I'll like water the paints down a little bit before I apply them. But if you're going to do that, you also have to be aware that it could bleed into other parts. So like test. Definitely make sure.
Practice with it. Like get a scrap piece of fabric of the fabric that you're going to use and kind of practice with it and see like how thick can you get the paint colors before it's, an effect you don't like anymore.
Definitely.
Just kind of test that out, figure it out, find out what you want that feel to be, and then see what it's like after, take that scrap piece and wash it after it dries. See what happens to the paint.
And like this is true of like your props and stuff, but also so much with fabric. That some fabrics are going to just like suck the paint up and take a ton of paint, and other ones like you're barely going to use any and it's going to have the effect you want. So, and that's true of like a lot of props and different like surfaces that you're going to paint on anyway.
Oh yeah.
So dyes are something we see a lot more with fabric. It's something you can use for props and whatnot, but we see it a lot more with fabric. Just make sure that you're aware of like what your fabric is before you try to dye it, because if you're using a synthetic fabric and you don't have a synthetic dye, you're going to have a really hard time getting it to take. Likewise, if you have like natural fabric with a synthetic dye, and it's going to affect the way it dyes. It's a beast. And the last one I wanted to talk about is like Batiks and Resists is another way to call it. It's basically, it feels kind of like a reverse dye to me, because you're applying a resist or a batik to where you don't want color. So this is like what I did when I did Vi Link from Breath of the Wild. I wanted it to be like kind of like an old-timey way of dyeing things. So I did the design in like a flour paste and just painted it on the fabric, and then I dyed everything, and then I washed the flour paste out, and it resisted the dye where I had painted it and left it like light colored.
I do remember you doing that.
Yeah. But you can do that with a lot of different fabrics. They do like most like commercial resists are going to be like wax based. And I haven't experimented with those as much, but I've seen some really amazing work in cosplay with different kinds of resists. So it's definitely something to look into, because it gives you a little bit more control over your dye and where you want it to go and where you don't want it to go. So that's fun. Anything else we should talk about with fabrics and paint? Like, that's like a super crash course of them, I feel like, but...
I did for Harley, I did use an airbrush, which has an acrylic kind of base paint, very watered down version. And that worked really well. I can't wash it too thoroughly without that concern. But I did buy like a pair of white shoes, and then I not spray painted, but airbrushed one red and one black. So they were at least the same cut of the shoe.
Oh, gotcha, yeah.
And then also like the fabric that Kaylin bought for Zir's jacket was just a little too bright green, and we ended up just giving it a light misting with black to give it kind of a dark kind of forest green. And
awesome.
Like it can be done, and you can like seal it afterwards, but then it's gonna futz with your end result of how the fabric drapes and if it can be washed ever again, stuff like that.
Yeah, definitely something to be careful of.
Yeah.
That's fun though. So did you get did you buy an airbrush? You have one now?
Yeah, I do.
Nice.
Kaylin got it for me for my birthday last year or Christmas. I don't remember.
Cool.
What is time? Time's an illusion.
Time is an illusion.
But yeah, I got a little mini one, and
they're so
I
fun
did the
to
shoes
use.
and yeah.
I need to try airbrushing. I have an airbrush that I was gifted.
Oh dang, yeah, they're super
time
fun.
ago.
They're super fun.
And
Just
I
make
haven't
sure you
used it.
clean them out real good. Yeah. So on that note, let's talk props, because paint is like the bread and butter of props. I feel like you can you can have a prop made out of like the cheapest material available, and if you have a really good paint job on it, no one can tell the difference.
Yep.
So
you can use just about anything as paint on props, depending on the material. Because, like, if you use like foam, and depending on the kind of foam too, because now there's so many different types out there. But in general, foam tends to eat up paint, and so you want to seal it before you paint it. Or if you're not going to seal it before you paint it, well, you're going to use a lot of paint.
Well, it also depends on the type of paint, because like there's the FX brand. And you don't need to put a sealer on your paint. Like that's what their main advertise is. It's a little bit more costly, but their colors are very vibrant.
No, like the first time that I made the butterfly wings for Princess Agatha for my sister, I went through so much paint, and I was just using that thin craft foam from like Joanne. It was just eating up so much paint, and I was like so shocked at it. But I hadn't sealed it at first, and that's when I learned that it just eats it up. I'm remaking those wings actually this week.
Nice.
And I am not going to use as much paint as I did the first time.
Good.
Because they're all cracked now, because it ate paint. But yeah, like, what do you want your final product to look like? Does it need to be shiny? Does it need to look like, a branch off of a tree and it's been weathered and like sitting in the dirt for forever? Like, there's like really creative ways that you can add that weathering using the paint. Dry brushing is a great method to use to weather like metals and things like that.
I've even seen like spray paints you can get that as they dry, they have like a hammered metal effect. So it has its own like built-in texture to it because the paints kind of separate and react as they dry.
Yeah.
So
that's what
cool.
I used on my Ecree cosplay that I took to Yellowstone.
Oh, nice.
For the metal bits on it, I wanted to look like somebody had pounded metal pieces like into these shapes, like forced them into it. And that I was like, this paint will do the job. Yes. It helped cover up my sculpting mistakes.
So, Mercedes, you mentioned weathering. Do you want to talk about like what that is and why it's important?
Yeah. Let's say you are cosplaying Aloy. She's out in the elements. No, never, right? She's out in the elements, just in the dirt, in the storms, in everything. I mean, she sometimes walks through a river and that's how she gets cleaned, or she even makes comments about the rain and, bathing.
It's raining. That'll feel nice.
Yeah, it's like, oh man, Aloy. Anyways, so weathering makes it look like you've been out in the elements without actually having to go out there yourself. One way is to go out there yourself and roll in the dirt, or you can just take your costume, a coffee can, or something bigger, depending on how big the pieces are, put a bunch of dirt, coffee grounds even, maybe even a little bit of paint, throw it all together, just chuck it down a hill. That is actually a legitimate way to weather a costume. Another way is that you can just dry brush with acrylics, and depending on like what the material is, like if you want to make dirt, don't just use brown. Like Aloy is in the deserts of Utah. There is a lot of red in that. So you start adding in those reds and sandy colors and all those, and just kind of add that in to make it look like it's been weathered over time. There's so many different methods. If you're weathering a piece of metal to make it look like it's aged, you're going to have oranges and reds in there to look like rust. There's a lot to weathering. Practice with it, play with it. Don't just use black, mix other colors in with it, especially if you're weathering metal.
What would you say as someone who has judged several contests, like the difference between someone who brings in a suit of armor that has been weathered and someone who has not?
If it's meant to not be, it's still impressive. I want to throw that out there real quick. Mm-hmm. But if it is supposed to be like, a knight who's been standing, at the ready and has to look beautiful next to the queen versus the knight who's been standing at the front gate and been in the rain, you're going to have a much different approach to how to make that armor look. If you're trying to convince me that your character that you cosplayed has traveled all around the world and they look pristine, I'm going to be like, cool. But if you add that weathering in there, it just feels more real. It also makes that costume pop on stage when you get those bright lights coming in. It's a way to add in those variances. So like even with the pristine armor that's in the, next to the queen, I would add some shading to it at the very least. It doesn't have to be weathering per se, but it can be shading that adds depth to it so it will still show up on stage. So you got weathering and you've also got shading and depth. Both of those can add such character to the character.
So I wrote down for most props and armor and things like that, you kind of have 3 steps when it comes to paint, which is priming, coloring, and finishing. And you can definitely have more in between because weathering is important and all kinds of stuff. But those are the main important ones to make sure you at least have those 3. So we talked about
weathering as part of coloring.
Yeah, for sure. So we talked about primer. It's there to give your paint something that's easy to adhere to. It also evens out the color underneath so that I've tried to paint over something that's been painted or has texture on it, and you put a layer of just direct color on it and you can still see the pattern underneath it.
Yeah.
And primer helps with that. Primer is there to even it all out.
Also, if you are doing a primer of something metallic, you want to use darker colors underneath. Where if you want something that's bright and pretty, then you're going to use a lighter color. You want to watch what kind of color of primer you're putting underneath because it will change how the final color is going to look. It has a little bit of an effect on that.
Like that. You talked about weathering in the color layer. We also have you mentioned shading, where you have a mid-tone that you start with, and then you can add highlights and shadows, and it helps it pop. I really like how, even if you're not, like you said, even if you're not rolling around in the dirt and your character is a shiny, pretty, nice thing, it's nice to have that depth to it to add some dimension.
Mm-hmm. You can add a clean shading to it where it doesn't,
absolutely.
It still feels like it's a clean, pristine, well taken care of set of armor that has never seen outside of the castle. But you can add that depth to it, but instead of just making it just a flat color. Because especially when it comes to metal is not a flat color.
Yeah.
Chromes and things like that are actually it's a bunch of colors combined into one and our brain doesn't know what to do with it.
Aha.
And that's why chrome looks the way it does.
Neat.
Yeah. So you play with it.
For sure. Any other tips on color before we talk about finish?
I would recommend going to YouTube and looking up SKS props.
Yes.
He is a fantastic prop builder, and he has a fantastic eye for color theory.
Ooh.
So he knows how to like layer something and goes, okay, so I want this to actually have a gold top. So instead of having just like he paints gold on black or anything along those lines, he talks about that primer layer of we're going to put red down so that way the gold really highlights, or we're going to put down this color so that way this color really highlights. So his color theory is really amazing, and watching him paint is a work of art in and of itself.
Oh man, that sounds amazing.
I completely agree with you on that. And like knowing color theory, that'll help.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So with finish, there are a bunch of different ways to finish, and like Mercedes, like you said at the start of props, it depends on what you want your end project to look like, what you want the result to be. Do you want it to be super shiny and clear and neat, or do you want it to kind of look like matte and faded and all of that fun stuff? So usually the finishes you'll see on like spray paints and different paints and clear coats and things like that are going to be one of these. And feel free to like experiment with them and see what effect works best for you. Look up people's videos and pictures, and chances are someone has used these before. And so you can have an idea of what it will look like in the end. What I noticed with looking these up and researching it more, because I honestly didn't know much about finishes other than I want it to look shiny or I want it to look matte, is that the more matte it looks, the more prone to damage it is. And the shinier it looks, the harder and like more durable it is, actually. So I did not know that, but I guess that's a thing. So like flat matte paint finish is going to give really good coverage, but less shine and prone to damage. You got eggshell, which is like a step up from that. It's kind like barely lustrous and it's a little bit more durable. You've got satin, which is again a little bit more shiny and good for a little bit more hard wearing things. You got semi-gloss, and then you got high gloss, and that's the shiniest. And I forgot to mention, but as you get shinier with these paints, it's going to show more imperfections. Like it's going to hit the light and you're going to go, oh yeah, that's not smooth.
Yep.
But they're also the hardest and most durable. So it's a trade-off of like, how much prep do you want to do to make sure that shiny is as shiny as it can be?
Yeah.
My go-to is usually to do a semi-gloss or high gloss. But I have used the others before.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I kind of talked a bunch about finishes, but what do you guys like to use when you do props and projects?
When you start, especially if anything deals with sanding, all of that prep work before you get to the finish is going to make the finish look even better. Again, like that whole, that's not smooth there with the high gloss sitting on there. The more prep work that you do before you put that finish on, the better that finish is going to look. So that's my advice.
Good.
My mentality is, what's in the can? What do I have right now? I'm much more fair. Like if I've gotten to this point, I'm just in the screw it, let's get this done stage.
Oh man.
I feel that. Understand that.
So last, I wanted to talk about using paints and pigments in makeup and wigs and body paints and things like that. So David, you had like recently experienced using it in a wig. What did you use exactly?
So I just used that RIT synthetic dye.
Oh, okay.
Nice.
So I did my research and I found out that there's a lot of drag queens and kings who like to get like very exaggerated colors in their dye, in their wigs. And one of the ways that they do that is they use a synthetic dye, and you can get a RIT synthetic dye. You need to make sure that like if you're getting a synthetic wig, you get the appropriate dye for it as well, because if you want it to stick,
right.
Essentially.
Absolutely.
And if you get the wrong type of dye, it can just eat away at the material that you're using.
No.
For some dyes, you have to put them in a pot that is almost 200 degrees Fahrenheit,
Oh, jeez.
and then let them sit with enough color to make a difference. And then it's a gamble. I'm not a gambling person. I have no reason against it. I just don't like gambling. But it's a strong gamble, and I not a fan. But it's worth it. Man, that wig looks fantastic.
Yeah. That's awesome. You reminded me, like, I forgot to mention this on props, but you can dye plastics with synthetic dye because it's a synthetic material.
Ooh,
so
I've never
if you
thought
have
of trying
like,
that.
I think you can. Don't quote me on this one, but I think you can use it with Sintra. But a few other like plastics and things you can use synthetic dyes. I know I've used it with friendly plastic. It takes it really well. And you can use it with like clear plastics. Like if you want it to be like a stained glass effect or different colors and things like that, you can use synthetic dyes. Yeah. Yeah, going back to wigs, like I did a similar like dip dye thing when I did my Samurai Chew. Just because I wanted some ombre like he has on his tail going into the like more yellowy blondie stuff. And yeah, it's it's a tricky thing. It definitely. Yeah, I've used acrylic and like fabric dyes, or fabric paints, but I usually will like water it down some, and even then, like it. So with a synthetic dye, you're changing the actual color of the fiber. With acrylic or fabric paint or whatever other things you're using,
you're coating
putting
it.
Yeah, you're putting something on top of the fiber, so it's still the same color deep down, and over time it's going to rub off. So plan accordingly. I was going to mention that with like alcohol-based dyes and markers and things, because like I've done some wig dye with like Copic markers and Sharpie markers.
Yeah.
They definitely will work, and I like it because it gives you a little more control where like dip dyeing doesn't. But it also has like, if you don't properly set it with like alcohol and things like that and let it dry completely, it will rub off on your costume. I learned that the hard way with a couple of different costumes. And yeah.
My method for when I add like darker roots or like some variants into a very flat looking wig is I'll take, if it's a blonde wig, I usually just grab a gold Sharpie because it just creates this nice brown. And I'll go through and I'll just like add it in where I think it looks good, create that variance that I want, and then let it dry and then wash it. And then do it again if it's faded too much, just do it again and again and again until I finally get the look that I want and let it be.
Right. So, no, I think that looks so good when the roots are a little bit darker. It gives like I don't know, it gives a very nice realistic effect. It
also adds like the shading to it because like it creates like this depth in the hair where like for me when I look at a wig, if it's just one flat color, it drives me crazy because I'm like, hair's not like that. I want to add some depth to it. I want to make it so that you can see, like, if it has layers, I want those layers to pop,
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, you can also use paints and pigments and whatnot in your body paints. They have definitely made like leaps and strides since I started cosplay, because I remember when there were not a lot of options for body paint, and now there's like all kinds of really cool ways to do it, and safe ways too, and like less smeary ways too. You're generally with body paints going to have one that's oil based or like alcohol based or water based, so make sure you know which one it is, because whichever one it is going to have different removers that you need, and the way that you set them will be different. So what works for one, it might eat away at another. So just be careful and research which one you're using. I I would love to get like a makeup airbrush just because I really like how the body paints look with a lot of the airbrush stuff. And I don't trust myself when I'm putting it on with like a brush or a sponge or whatever to get it even enough. So I like the control that has. But you can also use like oil-based, cream-based ones and use a setting spray or powder. What's all y'all's experience been? I know, David, you guys recently did some body paints with Poison Ivy, didn't you?
Yeah, Poison Ivy and Harley.
Yeah.
We're both.
Yeah.
That's right.
I am not that pale. I know I don't go into much sunlight, but I am not that pale.
What was your experience like?
So we did a good test. Like we kind of messed around with it. We got some setting spray. It was a water-based paint from Ben Nye.
Okay.
Which was really good.
Yeah.
My biggest complaint with the fact that it was water-based is that you can't really like coat in layers because then you get it wet and it kind of runs in that area. So it's tricky to get like a good even coat across with that. It's really good for like smaller areas, in my opinion. My recommendation is like do a test spot real quick, like on your arm or something, or somewhere that you could easily wash off. Because if you have an allergic reaction and that's on your face, that's not going to be fun.
Yeah.
Very good point. Very good point.
Know your allergies.
we used Ben Nye, and Kaylin got 2 different shades of green, one for just general layer, and then one for like lips and kind of like as a shading effect, essentially.
Oh, good plan. Yeah.
Good.
And yeah, it was really good. I definitely want to get different brands. Not that I had any problem with Ben Nye. I want to experiment with more. And definitely. I like the Harley cosplay a lot. I actually spent some time with my sister. My brother-in-law goes, "So what's that about? You as a woman character?" I was like, "Yeah, it's called gender bending." All right, whatever makes you happy, my guy.
Aw. That's cool, though. That sounds like it was a lot of fun and a good learning experience, though.
Definitely.
Mercedes, how about you with your, I can't remember his name, the tracer, blue guy?
Drifter.
Yes,
that's what it
Drifter.
was.
Well, that was the one and only time so far, because that costume's still sitting unfinished. I will admit my sewing machine's still on.
But you looked so you still have it on, Mercedes. No! It's been like 5 episodes since then. But you looked very awesome blue.
Yes. Very much a learning experience, like super fun figuring out like how that all went. I'm so glad it came off okay, and it'll probably come off even easier if I have the actual primer on my face first, instead of just being like, well, I can't find it.
Yeah. Primer just as important with makeup as it is with props.
Yeah.
And also setting finishing spray.
Yeah. But yeah, I also did the same thing where I had 2 different shades of the blue. One for like a base layer and the other for like shading it. And that worked out really nice. And
good.
The stream wasn't so like didn't do so great with like showing it on the video because of how my lighting was, but the pictures that I took afterwards, I was like, I really like how this has turned out.
Good. That's awesome.
And I'm looking forward to doing it again. I'm not looking forward to my face breaking out the following week like crazy, but I'll try and catch that better this next time.
Make sure we're looking into removers that are gonna hopefully leave your skin a little bit happier.
Yeah. My face has hated me for like a month now.
Oh man. I remember doing that when I did face paint for side on, and I'm like, next time I'm just gonna do a mask. I don't want to bother doing makeup for side on. But yeah, thank you guys for listening. So that's a fun topic to cover, paint.
Yeah.
Do we have any horror stories for this week?
Yeah, we do. We've got one more from our Discord channel, the Cosplay Horror Stories. Again, you can join our Discord by just clicking on the link that we share occasionally on our Twitter and our Facebook page. I try and make something clever every now and again of like, oh, look, it's fresh out of the oven. it's a Discord link. So it's a lot of fun. So just keep your eye on that, and we'll post a link every now and again. Ronan Eric writes, figured I'd throw one of my stories in here. Back in 2012, I made my first set of EVA foam armor. The costume was Proto Man from the Mega Man series. I didn't have time to do a full paint job, but hey, relevant. So I wrapped everything in red felt. Wow.
Ooh.
It worked and was super comfy to wear. It didn't have the punch I wanted. Cue bringing in the fiberglass. I've done fiberglass on cars for many years, so adding it to the cosplay was the obvious choice. I spent hours getting all the parts glassed up, smoothed, and painted. It looked great. I hadn't accounted for the fact that the fabric-covered foam would stretch and move, whereas the fiberglass does not.
Ooh.
The opening around my knees were just barely big enough to fit, so the boots were cutting into me all day.
Oh, no.
By the end of the day, I had to have my wife pull the boots off my poor stolen knees. I could barely walk the next day, and I still had my staff duties for the day, NDK charity auction. I only made it through by icing the heck out of my knees the next morning and downing a ton of ibuprofen. The boots got heavily modified around the knees after that.
Man, I bet. Oh, fiberglass, like, if you're not careful, it gets itchy everywhere and bad. But I can't imagine, like, having that digging into your knees. That,
Ouch.
Pain.
Yeah. I'm glad he's okay.
Yeah. If you would like, you can send us your own stories to share. There are many ways you can send them to us. There is, of course, the email, which is cosplaystitchandseam@gmail.com, or
go to cosplaystitchandseam.com and fill out the googly Google form,
or you can go to our Facebook page and send us a message there. You can wait for the Discord link and send it in our Discord page as well. Join our awesome community for our Work in Progress Wednesdays. These people are fantastic, and it's so great to see people ask questions and get relevant answers and like even ask like some silly questions of like, I don't understand X, Y, and Z. Can someone explain this to me? Really just a great community, and we love you all so much. Thank you so much for building this community around this silly little podcast that we do. We love you guys so very much.
Love you so much.
yay.
If you have sent in a horror story and we have not read it, please just bug us again. We'd be more than happy to make sure that we do read it. We just may have missed it in a wave of emails, or, time is an illusion during 2020. We have no idea what happened back
Is it
then.
ever?
But if you're on the internet, if you want to help out the show, there's a lot of different ways that you can do that. We don't pay to advertise, so word of mouth is very important. That's super helpful, but also leaving us a review on Apple Podcast, Podchaser, or Audible. Any of those places will help us out. We'll give you a shout out on the show when we see those. And speaking of shout out on the show, we want to give a shout out to our patrons. At patreon.com/cosplaystitch. For $3 a month, you get the shout out, and for $5 a month, you get to join our D&D game. Much like some of these fantastic people at Queer Eye Sci-Fi, Howl, Kaz, Hot Riku, Renamira, Jazzy Kofed, Jaguar Quinn, Gloria Shu, Sudi, Stacy Pitt, Shock H, and Silver Deeds. You guys make the show as good as it can be. And if you can't afford a monthly thing like Patreon, we do have a coffee, KOFI, Cosplay Stitch. Or if you just want to give us a high five next time you see us, that's awesome too.
I can't wait to actually receive high fives.
Dude, for real.
I'm so excited for that.
For real.
Don't forget, we have that Discord stream coming up on May 29th. That'll be at 7 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. We'll be watching Dungeons and Dragons. I am very excited. I haven't seen it, or if I have, it's been so long, I have dismissed it from the depths of my memory. So I'm very excited about that. One more shout out for our new community project, which is our Fanfic Submissions. If you would like your fanfic to be read on the air for a fun little episode podfic thing, we're going to do that. We'll be taking those till July 1st. So yeah, send us a little birthday fanfic. I want that.
Yeah.
And
PG-13.
PG-13, please. We also have foxbeautycosmetics.com. Remember, you can use that code at checkout, Stitch and Seam. Gives you 10% off your purchase. Thanks as always to Macy Roberts for the use of her theme song, and David Jeffers for always being such an amazing editor. How are your podcasts going?
Oh, they're going so good. Comic Trades Monthly. We are going to be reading Infidel, which is the story of ghosts, racist ghosts. It sounds hilarious. It's really not. It's a really heavy book, and it's horror. It's horror like I have never read before, and I love it. I actually read this one day back before I was like on the podcast as consistently, and there was one day that I think it was Mercedes was in the studio and you were still in Oregon, and I remember I flipped the page and I stopped and like I had goosebumps down my back. Like it was just like, oh gosh. So yeah, Comic Trades Monthly, we'll be doing that. Dungeons and Chill is still going strong. The Pancakening, if you have not listened to that, is a great episode for our Curse of Strahd game. And then the next episode should be coming out soon. And of course, The Last Voice. We are... I don't even want to talk about it too much because I don't want to take the story away from anybody who hasn't joined.
Yeah, I just barely got caught up, and it's getting intense. I was like, okay.
That's good to hear. But it's been so exciting, and I can't wait for more episodes. And I really hope that all of you go and at least listen to a couple of episodes, and doing all the podcasty things over there as well.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you guys so much for listening. So, question for you guys. So, if
I'm ready.
So, if you get paint on your clothes, it's called a stain, right? Right. Yeah. So if you're doing it on purpose, is it a form of entertainment? Boo. Bye, guys.
Bye.
See you.